This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 152.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, Benny? How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I am doing well. So in case you don't know us, we have 152 episodes in. I am Ramsey, the host of We the Sales Engineers, and with me is my great co-host with the guitar thing just showing right at the edge, and his name is Binayak Kunungu, aka Benny the Beard.
Yep, thank you. Oh, I thought that was the name of my guitar for a second. Yes, that's also my name, though. We share the same name.
Wait, your guitar is called the Beard?
No, it's not.
You don't make sense.
You introduced the guitar, and then you started talking about how its name was, or his name was, as if you're talking about the guitar. One could interpret it that way, but you were always talking about me. But anyways, yeah, doing well.
All right.
152 though. And this is a pretty special one. I think the listeners are going to like this one quite a bit. Got somewhere a little bit different than normal in that, still a sales engineer, still a solutions engineer, but just in an industry or a space that you may think you know, but I would say most of you probably don't know as well as you may think.
Well, that's what I wanted, Doc. So our guest is Doc Ballje. Our guest is Doc, and he sells printers. And turns out printers are a little bit more complicated than you would think. And I didn't know that. I thought printer is a printer, or as he calls them, copiers, because he's old school like that. So whatever we talk about today goes for anything that could be seen as a commodity. Printers are seen as commodities because you can go to Staples, Best Buy, whatever, buy a printer. Costco. I bought mine from Costco recently. Or it could be a solution. Depends on how good the salesperson is and how good the SE is.
And on top of that as well, I'd say that a lot of the people, or a lot of the things or techniques that he uses to turn an otherwise commodity sale to more of a solution sale are things that people that are selling software that aren't necessarily selling commodities could also probably take in and also leverage. Just the techniques around storytelling and digging into exactly what it is that a customer needs and opening up maybe things that giving them ideas of things they may need that they may otherwise not have thought of are all super effective, I think.
Well, software could turn into a commodity, right? Yeah. Even if you want a CRM, if someone doesn't know how to differentiate their CRM, it's a commodity, right? Whether it's Salesforce or something else, like Oracle. If you can't actually solve a problem, if you're not selling a solution, it's a commodity. So even software, anything could be a commodity. It's just not a physical one. But yeah, a lot of great tips on how to change from a commodity to a solution. A lot of great tips about listening. How about we just jump in?
For sure. One thing just before we jump in, though, it is worth mentioning. So I know a few acronyms are thrown around, or you'll hear shortly a lot of acronyms are kind of thrown around in the call or show, I suppose. One in particular, though, that was called out a bunch, OCR, just stands for optical character recognition. So this is all within the context of printing and stuff. So just think of how a computer may look at a document of words. Maybe you take a picture of a thing that you wrote up, and it's able to recognize what characters have been written. So, anyways, you'll hear that a lot alongside a whole bunch of other acronyms. I just want to quickly call that out.
Doc explains it on the call, but it's good that you actually highlight that at the start as well. So let's jump in. What's going on, Doc? Welcome back to this platform. How you doing?
Hey, Ramsey, just doing great. I'm getting such a lot of response from our last interview, and I really appreciate that. So good to be on here again and talking about some other stuff. So nice. Thanks.
It's my pleasure. And just for people who don't know, you were on the No SE Left Behind segment, and which we're limited to 10 minutes thanks to LinkedIn. They don't let us do more than 10 minutes. So now that you have a little bit more time, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself without feeling rushed?
Well, that all started in a 5,000 watt radio station. No, that's the old thing from the Mary Tyler Moore show. But yeah, it's great to be here. My name's Doc Ballje. My real name's Don. I'll tell you that, but everybody calls me Doc. You can call me the doctor if you want to be a little more formal. Some folks said, what's your first name? And I always said but that's from the old radio days. But I've been able to use that in my persona in the printing business. I've been in the printing industry now for about 20 years. and selling copiers and things, but we'll get more into that in just a bit. So my history has a lot of different things in it, and much of it deals with presentations and speaking, and a lot of people like my voice and like what I'm presenting. From my point of view, I think people want to turn me on, and listen to me just so they can turn me off. I'll probably put some to sleep, but that's beside the point. I get a lot of good response, and I'm glad that I can effectively communicate. That's really the bottom line. And communicating is such an important thing to have with people. And I don't care who you are or what you are or anything like that. I can communicate with you. And I love talking to all sorts of people just to get all sorts of different ideas and things into what we're doing here on this big spinning planet Earth that we live on.
I have to admit that if I ever write a book, I would want you to read the audiobook. I just love the sound of your voice. I feel like, I can listen to it for hours. So I don't know if people turn it on just to turn it off. I think people turn it off.
Old radio humor there. I got to throw some of those things in.
I'm just thinking it's the opposite. People turn it off so they can turn it on and say, hey, I heard it again. So who are the customers you work? I've never talked to someone in the printing industry. So I don't know who would you sell to?
Everybody.
Okay.
Think about it. If you have an office, you probably have a printer. Now, if it's a small office, it's just you and a couple people, you might have a printer that you picked up at, Staples or Office Max or something like that. That might be all that you need. But if you're in any kind of business at all, now you need a printer, a copier, things to do things. And copiers have changed. Back when I first was starting in the business, a copier wasn't connected to the network. It was simply a copier. And you needed that for your business, for receipts and things for customer service and that type of thing. So you put the piece of paper in, press the button and make a copy. Well, things started to change. And shortly after, we found out that we can make copies, people figured out you could put a little device into it and then you could print to it. So now all of a sudden people are starting to print to it. But at the same time, they're like, well, we have to scan this document to make a copy. So let's put a little more stuff in the copiers and we can actually scan a document now too. So you look at today's copier and where it is, it's in every kind of office there is, whether it's an SMB market to a full enterprise market, because there's so many things you can do. The copier today mostly prints, then scans, and then copies. So copy is kind of, even though that's how it was designed, is kind of the last thing that copiers do today. People aren't making as many copies today. Things are electronic. On the reverse side of that, you've got a piece of paper and you want to make it digital and you want to inject it into your business processes. That's where this copier comes into play, especially in an enterprise type of situation where you can take and use a copier as a hub. It can be the center of your organization. You transform a document, make it electronically, and now you can move it throughout the entire organization electronically and do anything, that you can do with an electronic document, whether it gets OCR'd, optical character recognition. I always try to, explain when we just go into acronyms, but sometimes people just don't know. So there's OCR technology where it looks at that electronic document and it tries to figure out what the words are and change it into, code that the computer can deal with. And now I've got a Word document. Now I've got a PowerPoint document. A PDF is essentially an encapsulated version of that print. It's really kind of a picture of that print. That's where PDFs really came into play. I remember when, PDFs first started coming into the market as well, because you'd have a Word document. I'd try to, I'd send the Word document over to you. You'd open it up and it would look completely different because you didn't have the font on your system. You didn't necessarily have an image there, or the image came over, as a very pixelated type of image, that sort of thing. So PDFs were created to encapsulate that document and essentially make it a picture. Why is that important? Because a copier will print a picture really without any kind of driver or any kind of need for anything. So if you've got a TIFF, you've got a JPEG, you've got a PDF. Just about every copier today, you can just send that over to the copier without a print driver and have it print. So, it takes these things and it looks at it as a picture, and then it outputs it. So now you have a hard piece of paper, once again, depending on what you need to do. So that copier is great for transitioning a document, whether you need to have a hard copy or whether you need to, I'll call it even a soft copy, an electronic copy. So that's what it does.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So it basically sells to everybody. But here's the thing. Everybody knows that they may or may, like, they need a printer or they don't. It's, you're in an office, you need a printer. What is your role in selling them a printer?
So it goes beyond the printing. Usually the salesperson is going to just talk about the copier or the printer. I'm going to say copier, and we'll loosely make that a printer as well, because that's what they're doing. But there's a problem with that scenario. The problem is the fact that there are so many OEMs, original equipment manufacturers of copiers. They all pretty much do the same thing. Yeah. The joke that I've always had in the copier industry is a copier does two things. It makes copies and it breaks. I mean, those are the two things that a copier does, or that printer or that scanner. So you want to make sure that you've got an organization that can repair that copier. Now, copiers are sold, and that's not the end of the sale for the salesperson or for the company, because the company then makes money on what are called clicks. So how often that printer is printing, clicks will appear, and it might be a single click for a letter size piece of paper, but if you've got an 11 by 17, there might be 2 clicks for that. Some companies only charge 1. I mean, it gets really confusing, but that's what the other part of what they sell is this contract for how many prints are you going to do. You kind of pay ahead for that, and that's where now the copier companies get their money. The reason I go that way, and I'm talking about that, is because, again, the printer is a printer. It could come from just about any OEM. They all, make copies and break. So there's not a lot of difference between the items. When a salesperson is in there and just talking the difference of the printer and the copier, and that's all they're talking about, it really boils down to price. And that copier salesperson has to keep dropping price and dropping price and dropping price until, finally they agree on something and they sell it. And the copier sales representative makes, $25 or something for that sale. And I always ask them, what have you really made? You've put a lot of time into this and a lot of effort into it, and you've just sold a copier. They don't get stuff on the clicks typically. I mean, some organizations do that. They get paid on the sale of the copier. Well, they didn't get very much. They worked pretty hard to get that deal. It takes a long time to get that customer there. So what do? I come in and talk about what the copier can do beyond printing and scanning and copying. And that's where we'll start getting into discussion. See, a lot of people actually don't realize that a copier is a small computer, and they try to jam a whole bunch of things into these printers and copiers today. I mean, I've got protocols on there that are turned on that are even legacy protocols and things that shouldn't even be turned on. Some of these copiers broadcast themselves, so I can take a smartphone and I can just print to it. They do also, you've got then authentication. If you really want to get an idea of what's going on, you need to authenticate. So now I have to start talking to maybe Active Directory. Maybe I need to talk to G Suite. Maybe I'm using Okta or some other type of program like that. So now you're like, oh, well, it's not a printer. You're getting really involved in high tech. Printing might need high availability in an enterprise type of scenario. So they don't want the printing to go down because they're, maybe it's a law firm or something like that. They're printing dissertations. They're printing, a lot of different things they need for court. And that's got to print right now because they're going to court in about 5 minutes. So you need to be able to make sure print is running. So high availability might come into play. Well, that can be a problem. Windows deprecated the print clustering in the latest versions of Windows. You can still cluster, but they took the printing part out. So now you got to look at doing, some virtual printing or maybe using network load balancers and things like that so you can get the job out. So now, again, it's not just Oh, wow, you know how to set up a print driver in the printing industry. No, I can do a lot more than set up a print driver. And even that can get complicated too, but there's a lot more involved. You've got security. I always talk about hardening your printer. So these are some of the discussions that I'll have that the salesperson can't have with their end user. So hardening the printer, turning off those unused protocols. Do you need all that kind of stuff running? Turn off anything that you can so you don't have, any type of hack, or because they're on the computer. They're running a system of some kind. Might be kind of a Unix or a Linux type system in the background, but you can still get in through a lot of different ways and do some damage in the network. So you got to be able to protect that. There's different technologies that are out today too. There are like mesh networks that are coming out, which are starting to be cloud driven and zero trust type of configurations. So we're getting involved in all the latest and greatest technology, and you might say, well, why don't you just put the print server up in the cloud and be done with it? Well, you can. I talk to a lot of IT directors that have done that, and they go, it's not going so well. Why is that? You have to kind of understand printing a little bit to get a good gist of that. Let's take PowerPoint for an example. PowerPoint is a program that's made really for on-screen presentations. That's what it was designed for. But so many salespeople, myself included, will use a PowerPoint presentation for their customer, and they might want to print that PowerPoint out, as they go in and deliver it to the end users. They need 5, 10 copies, whatever. Well, PowerPoint, since it's designed for display purposes, are going to crunch images down. They're all, compressed. Everything's compressed. So you've got a PowerPoint file. Let's say it's, 50 megs, not a great big file, 50 megs. But when you go to print that PowerPoint, it becomes 500 megs after things uncompress and, and starts to become into a print language, turning it into a picture, like I mentioned before, so that the copier understands what to do with it. So now all of a sudden, I want to print from the cloud. Well, I've got PowerPoint. It's got images in it. I send that job up and down. It's 500 megs going up and down. Does that make sense? Do your pipes handle that? Do you have enough bandwidth to handle that? So now how do we do cloud situations, but yet keep jobs like that, on earth, if you will, so that they can travel from the workstation to the printer? There's a lot of variables, a lot of things that go on in the print world that people just don't understand. And these are the types of problems that we need to solve. Okay. InDesign is another good example of that too. A graphics program like that. So those are the challenges we face.
This is very interesting, because if I were to go buy a printer today, I would never think of any of that. I would just call someone up if I were a business owner and say, hey, I want a printer, sell me a printer. And if they say, hey, do you want to talk to my SE about this? I'm like, why? I just want to buy a printer. Sell me a printer. I don't want to talk to anybody else. How do you get people to actually, and this happens with many other, like, right, not specifically printers, like in my line of work, hey, I want to buy a test tool. Why do I need to talk to an SE? How do you or your salesperson convince the customer that it's important to meet with the technical expert?
That's where solution selling comes into play. And this is where we need to listen to the customer. So many reps are just quick to reply to a question that's asked, well, does it do this, or can I do that? Oh, yeah. And then they'll describe it, but they're not necessarily understanding why that question was asked. So, why, Mr. Customer, are you asking me if I can scan to Google Cloud? Is that important for you? Well, yes, it is. What do you do with it, when it gets into Google Cloud? So you start to question along that line. As I mentioned before, the printers become a commodity. So if the salesperson doesn't address the commodity and, they're just going to sell it for the lowest price, and the customer is going to buy the lowest price, and, it's not necessarily a win-win. For the most part, the salesperson loses. The customer wins. They get a device at a good price. But if the salesperson took some time and actually talked with that end user and actually tried to discuss some of these things that I was talking about, moving documents electronically throughout the organization, what would it mean to you if we could go ahead and take this piece of paper, put it into the copier, have the copier go through that document, analyze keywords out of it, maybe do a zone OCR, pick some information. That information gets dumped into a database for your document management system, while the document itself goes over to some kind of repository to be stored, and doing all of these types of things. Would that help your business? And those are the types of questions that the salespeople need to ask. And specifically when you're printing, again, I talked about clicks. So now you don't want to have wasted clicks. You don't want to just have people printing. And, the CFOs and things know that. They're like, you can look at Gartner studies, for instance. Gartner will tell you that printing can be up to 3% of your revenue. That's a lot of money. When you look at it, if you just let people print willy-nilly. All right, I've got a small organization, we can control our printing. That may be true. But in a large organization, what you'll find when you start going through print logs is you'll find garage sale flyers. You'll find invites to the fraternity, in schools. We do a lot of things with schools like that. So they're printing out all the frat invites and the parties and things like that. That's not necessarily the type of thing you want them to print, at least for free, because it costs you money. Black and white isn't too bad. But color, now you use 4 different toners with a color device. So that's like 4 times the price of a black and white. And if you're printing on larger paper, et cetera, these prices just start to escalate. And if you don't control it, your price will, your end costs will just go out the window. So now print management has been a very popular thing with devices. And that's really where I've been involved with heavily over the last 4 years, and in probably the last 10 years, it's been talked about quite a bit. But print management is the type of thing where, you actually have control over printing. Most importantly, with a print management system, especially if you're an enterprise or a school, schools are notorious for just printing. Now you can look at who, what, where, when, why, how, all of these different elements for printing. You might even want to give a quota to people. You can only print a certain amount, that gives them, they have to be a little more careful about how much they're printing. But that's all good for the bottom line of the company, especially these days, with, COVID and everything happening, everybody's trying to contain costs. Jobs are being eliminated, like mine, because of things like this. And, so you want to contain costs everywhere you can. Printing is one of the most unmanaged pieces of anything that you can have in your office. And that's where a salesperson needs to, bring that out of the customer and use some good techniques for solution sales to make sure they're not just talking about a copier. They're talking about how this will benefit them. And if it's done right, how they can actually get a return on investment for what they've spent, and not, have an expenditure itself. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. So you're basically changing it from a commodity sale to, like, anybody can, like, you're selling screws or screwdrivers, it's commodity, to a solution where there are some issues that they may not have thought of. You're bringing up to light and provide a solution to that as well.
Exactly. When you look at a print job can go through some processing. We might need to look at an ERP system where it's going to be printing from, for instance. Maybe you need to print a whole bunch of documents and put them together to do a print, and you're doing some document mastering. Variable data, that's another good one. You get stuff in the mail every day, and it's like, hey, Ramsey, we got this for you. And they, even from the databases that we fill out, we know that you like, ice cold beer, and we know you like this kind of brand. And so, you get stuff in the mail that's targeted to you with your name on it, sometimes written in sand or something like that, with a nice tall cool one next to it. And you go, oh, wow, that's cool. So that's like variable data printing, because they know who you are, they know what you like. And then you get all these elements. So a template comes through, but now you put stuff into it to make those things print. So each print is different, but yet you've just printed out, 600,000 things. Those are the types of things you need to know. What is your customer printing? I mean, why do they need this printer? Is it just to print some emails? Well, maybe they don't need all this kind of stuff. Hopefully they're not printing emails because they're electronic anyway. But, those are the things that you look at. Do you have a production house? Do you need to print something? Let's say Coca-Cola is your customer. Do you need to print something that has the red Coca-Cola color? And it can't be just red. It's got to be that specific color. Well, to have that happen, you need a very sophisticated type of computer that can analyze the color, can look at it. You actually use things like spectrophotometers. I just like saying that word, spectrophotometer. So a spectrophotometer can actually analyze the color and take a look at it and make sure that you're printing what are known as Pantone colors, an exact color. And there's, Pantone comes out with a color every year. I always love Pantone. Our color this year is such and such, So, do you need to do that without questioning, without asking your customer these questions? You might have missed an integral part of what they need. They might just not buy from me because you didn't address something that I need, So that there's so many different elements there, and solution selling requires that skill of being able to talk to your customer and use active listening. Active listening is just so important. And I didn't quite do it here. I just kind of cut you off, but it's better when you're talking to just let the customer go and to let them talk. Many times, as much as, being an old radio guy, I don't like dead air, but I'll force myself sometimes when that customer stops. I'll just kind of sit there. I'm usually taking notes, writing some things down, but I'll just pause. And I'll go, oh yeah. And then I need this. Okay. Writing that down, just listening. And then we need to do that, and they'll start bringing all sorts of stuff to you. The salesperson, it never fails, that's sitting next to me. They're like kicking me going, I didn't know this. I didn't know they need this stuff. And, when we do a debriefing afterwards, oh my gosh, you pulled out so much information from that customer that I've been trying to get, but they wouldn't talk to me. Well, you were probably asking questions and just replying. You weren't asking questions to understand what it is they need to do. And again, this relates to any industry, like you were saying. So once you understand what they're doing, now you can have a focused conversation and you're understanding what they want. You're not just replying to a question that they have. The question might not even be relevant. They might just be asking an inquisitive question, Does it interact with Active Directory? Oh yeah, well, let me explain that all to you. We've got, a native integration, you might not have had to go that route,
There's probably a couple of things I'd imagine, at least, or a couple of tips, or probably a couple of things that a lot of sales engineers can get out of what you just said, especially just that whole technique of listening and then being okay with dead air. There's probably a couple of things happening there when they are disclosing so much to you. One is probably, well, you are the sales engineer, so you are that more trusted person that isn't so much selling to them. So they're going to give you a little bit more to begin with. But just in general, and you'll hear it in negotiations all the time as well, when you either like pose something or pose a question, or might have an uncomfortable moment where you are essentially posing a question to them, let them speak and let them just say everything, because they'll spill all the beans that they otherwise may not. And if you just kind of fill in the gap, then they'll be less likely to do that. So definitely just pose your questions, be silent, let them stew over them, let them answer them eventually, and you'll get a lot more out of it than you may otherwise expect. So it's cool to hear that works for you as well. I do want to ask something else though, based upon what you'd mentioned. So you said that obviously from switching over from commodity selling to solution selling is necessary for you to do well in what you do. You did mention too, though, that sometimes customers, they might not necessarily always know what they want either. And that's pretty common, I guess, in a lot of different industries, not necessarily just printing. But to what extent, if you don't mind me asking? So do you find that most customers are those that are coming to you with just the basic need of, I have a printer, or I don't know, maybe I want to upgrade my printer, or maybe my last one broke and I'm just looking for something to replace that? Or do they typically have a really good sense of everything that's required? As clearly there's a lot that goes into printing and printers and copiers and all that than a normal person may expect. Do they know that typically when they come in to speak with you, or are you typically the one to present to them all these different, factors that will go into their decision that they weren't aware of before?
It's a little bit of a mix, Benny. Some of the people, especially if you have an RFI, as we call it here in North America, a request for information or a request for proposal, and there are some specifics that you're there in a meeting to address. But many times when it's a cold call, well, I'll back up a little bit too. the salesperson that cracks me up is the one that, finally gets the appointment with the end user, the customer. And they walk in and they look at the customer and they go, I'm so glad that we meet today because I've got the solution for you. And the customer is thinking, my toilet's backed up right now. I wonder if he brought a plunger with him, because that's my problem that I have today. And that's a solution I can use. So, they'll walk in and go, I have a solution. How can you talk about a solution when you especially on a first appointment, or you just don't know that customer? So that's where it becomes really important. And no, a lot of customers don't realize it, but they don't always realize what the copier in our case can do. And maybe, commodity that you sell, they may not realize that your commodity can, make coffee at the, beginning of the day without you doing anything to it. And, for me, that would be very important. I'd want that to happen. So, and here's the other thing too. A bunch of copier companies. So if a copier person's looking, they're probably talking to many different companies. If you are the one that can come in and talk about a technology, and you're the first one to kind of talk about that technology, like print management. I understand you're looking for a copier, but let's talk about the who, what, when, where, why, etc. And you start talking about print management, it becomes an exclusive thing for you and that customer to talk about. And now, if they are talking to someone else, they're going to propose that question to them. Well, I kind of need some print management. So sometimes if I'm getting those questions from the customer, I have a feeling that maybe they've talked to, another salesperson, the day before, that same day, even as far as that goes. But if I'm the one that can get that in there, which is a real advantage in solution sales, if I can be the first one to present the idea, you kind of own that idea with the customer. The other companies are playing catch up. Oh, we can do that too. We can do that too. But your end user customer is going, well, you didn't tell me that before. And that's a real need that I have. And these guys over here, when they brought Doc in, he told us all about that stuff. And Doc's pretty cool too, so I like what they were doing. And while these people say they can do it, I got a little more trust because these people brought it out. They're the ones that, they're not going to say it like this, but they vetted it out and understood exactly what my problems were so they could present a solution. And here's the beauty about a solution sale. If you specifically have the solution that your customer is looking for their problem, price is really almost out of the window. I mean, it's like secondary. Yeah, they're going to hit you for price, but you can always counter with, I'm a little bit more, because remember, we've got the solution in there. You needed these documents to be OCR'd, be in a Word document, placed in your repository, and then also into the document management system, and, for all that kind of stuff to happen. So that's what I've talked to you about. And that's what's in our proposal. So, it's a complete solution. Now, I can give you a better price. I'll just pull the solution away. I love doing that. I'll pull the solution away and we'll get you a better price. Well, wait a minute. I need that. Okay, great. Well, here's our offer, So it works. So, and you might have to wiggle a little bit with price, but it's pretty much secondary. If you've solved the problem, you've understood what they have, you've got the solution for them, and you present it, they're going to pay for it. And they also appreciate the time that you have done, that, you've done that, and they're willing to pay for your time in so many cases. Sure. I mean, you got the one-offs that they're going to look at it and see if they can buy it on Amazon. I mean, yeah, I get it. But those are kind of few and far between, especially if you've got that relationship going and they know who you are and they understand what you're doing.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. I love that. Like yeah. And the other people may have the same solution that you do, but they didn't bring it up.
Right.
They may not have put it in the proposal.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they didn't know about it. Right. And
and also I find this extremely important. When I talk about tech, I talk about it in regular words so that they understand. I'm really good at and this is where a good solution salesperson needs to be, speaking about technology in regular words. I find a lot of salespeople that aren't getting assistance from a sales engineer, they'll go in and, oh yeah, I understand what you need. And they'll just start throwing TLAs, 3-letter acronyms all over the place. Well, we just do this, and, and they're going to techno babble you. So it just sounds like they know what they're talking about. I don't like to do that. I like to use real words. And then another thing that I'll do is verify satisfaction, or verify that I'm understanding your problem. This is what I heard. Now, let me repeat back that this is what you need. And therefore, they know that you're listening. And, when they nod their head and they go, yeah, that's exactly it. You really know how to proceed. And you've been speaking in regular language. Or if I do use an acronym, like I did earlier, OCR, I'll explain it. Are you familiar with that? Do I need to bring it down or bring it up? Even for that matter, if I'm talking to an IT director, maybe I can just, talk, AD and G Suite and LDAP and, stuff all day long, they understand what I'm talking about. So understand your audience, know how to talk to your audience is extremely important in solution selling as well.
Like even in general, the one thing you mentioned there around just repeating or rephrasing what they said, just to make sure that you understand their issue in your own words, is such a great technique in general. For all sorts of different things, whether it be in sales to make sure that they know that you know what they're talking about, or for yourself even to make sure that you know what they're talking about for yourself, not even for them. And even like conflict resolution or whatever it may be, just that whole technique of just making sure that there's nothing misinterpreted by just reiterating things yourself. There's so much good that comes out of that, which is excellent. I did have a question off the top. Oh, right. So also, we're talking about using very simple language when speaking to your customers, especially in printing. That can be very technical. But also, so I come from a space where I've only ever had to sell software, never had to really deal with a physical product associated to the sale. So Rams, you could probably answer this as well. But to the both of you, how do you strike that balance between showing and telling when you're selling a physical product, where you can't necessarily show everything that the product can do, but unless you're lugging a printer along with you, how do you just articulate all of the value? Or is that relatively easy to do in your space? Whereas like showing it may not be as practical. I don't know. I have a general question.
Probably the biggest help for that type of thing is the storytelling method. Okay. And that involves case studies. So knowing your product, for one thing, that's key. For, my last position was a subject matter expert. I knew everything inside and out of the product, not only in the technical side, but on the sales side, and then case studies. So when they're kind of hemming and hawing a little bit, perhaps, or not quite understanding what you're trying to tell them, that's where you can go into this. I spoke with somebody in a situation very similar to yours, and they were in this same place, and they wanted to get to this place. And so our organization came in and we did this, that, and the other. And again, depending on their technical level of expertise, that's where you level it in. You don't have to talk about, we put in, 20 servers with high availability and VLANs all over, so data doesn't go, they don't know what the heck you're talking about. So it's, we had a customer like yours. They had a similar problem. They wanted to get to here. We were able to do that by implementing this simple strategy. I always try to make it easy, a simple strategy of doing, X, Y, and Z. And that will get you there if you follow this procedure that we're laying out for you. We've had so many other customers do it. So storytelling is wonderful. And people like hearing stories of how you've helped other customers and brought them to a success area that they've never reached before.
Sense. Yeah. And that's definitely a common theme I feel we've come across a lot on the show, just the importance and the value of storytelling in sales. And I think that carries across to both realistically, whether it be in your situations, or even let's say if you're selling software as well. I mean, telling the story of how the software is going to benefit you, or just how the solution in general is going to benefit their organization and lead to all these great things that will make them and their organization better in the end. I think that'll always win more often than not.
There is something I want to point out, that even right now, even if we're selling hardware, I sell hardware, like pieces of equipment. Everything is controlled through software. So from a demo perspective, if you want to show something, at least for me, I don't know, Doc, your experience, you're still showing them the software. You're connecting through the computer, and showing them how it works. Now, unless they want to see how many they want proof that it prints 600 pages per second, maybe then you'd have to lug a printer with you. But for the rest of the time, I think you can demo everything virtually, really. I don't know, Doc, what do you think?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. What I love to do, well, with the latest software and many different softwares too, is when I do a demonstration, I don't use PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I'll joke about it too. I'll start off with, I've got 120 slide PowerPoint deck, let's get started. And they, you see the look on their face. Oh my, no. I'm going to open up the application. I'm going to ask you some questions, what's important to you, because my application can do all this stuff, but I'm going to bore you if I do all that. So let's get an idea of exactly what you need. And I'm going to show you these different pieces. Now, if you want to see more, we'll continue with that. And so, yeah, software, demonstrations are wonderful when you do them right, and that's probably the way you're going to go. And virtual is the best way to go for that, because you can bounce around. I mean, I've got like 7 screens in front of me with stuff, so when I'm doing demos, I'm able to pull from here, pull from there, grab some information, and say, okay, let me bring this over and show you exactly how it's done. So yeah, that's a fun way of doing it, is being able to do it that way.
Do you actually have 7 screens in front of you?
I do. I count my phone as well, but I get a lot of information on the phone as well. A lot of times I just prop that up right here. But yeah, I've got a couple of laptops. I've got actually 3 laptops. I've got a Mac, because I'm multi-OS as well.
Ooh.
So I need to know, Windows, how does a Mac, and, so if I get the question, well, let me fire up my Mac, and I'll show you. I also I've got a philosophy about demos. I don't have any proof of this, and I kind of think I heard it once, but I'm not even too sure about that. But here's one thing that I have found in my demos. First of all, as we talk about what you want to see, I'm going to show you something, and it's going to work like this. And I outline the process. Here's what you're going to see, more of the storytelling stuff. And then I show it to them. I go, see, this is what I was talking about, and it just did that. And then we close up, and I explain again. Now, did you get it? I showed you this, and did that make sense? Did I kind of prove that point? Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Then I do that again a second time. Well, now let me show you this. We need to do the same process. Guess what? After I do that 2, maybe 3 times, I don't have to show them anything anymore. I have validated my responses. And again, I have no, proof, no university or anything that says that's what you do. That's just been something I've done for like 20 years. And it's like, I proved 2 things, and now they respect me, and I don't necessarily have to prove anything else. Whatever I say goes for gold, because I've done it.
It sounds very similar to the tell, show, tell methodology that Bob Reifstall wrote about in his book. Yeah. I mean, maybe you don't have proof, but I think he's kind of proved it in his book through many other people like yourself who have talked about it as well. So It's anecdotal evidence, but still evidence nonetheless.
There we go. It does seem to work. And especially if you're honest, that's, honesty is the biggest thing. Don't tell any lies, when you're doing, and these are the things that I talk to the salespeople about. So now, the salespeople are off on their own, and they're out and out selling, and, they want to try this solution sales thing. Okay, great. Here's what you do. You start talking about, don't lie, especially if you're talking to somebody in IT, because a lot of times they'll set you up for a question, to see if you know, and then you'll spit off some acronym, and they go, that guy doesn't know anything. So don't lie. Don't do anything like that, but start asking questions. Ask questions as long as you can. And then you'll get to a point where you can't answer the question. And this is what you do. You say, these are great questions. I would like to set up another appointment. I'm going to bring in my sales engineer with me who can explain a lot of this stuff. And you close for the next appointment. I have verified this with every sales manager I've ever worked with, and sales director, and anybody in sales. Is it okay if your salesperson says, gee, I want to bring somebody else in and, we'll close for the next appointment. They all go, yeah, the sale is moving forward. You've closed for the next appointment. That's perfect. That's what you got to do. So there's nothing wrong with that. I had a wonderful experience with what I'll call a document distribution software that I was heavily involved with, a subject matter expert for that as well when I was at Canon. And we had a conference. At this conference, they brought in customers that bought the product. And there was a big forum. And, they were actually, the people for the product were talking about how to sell the product. And then they had customers up there that talked about why they bought the product. It was, all in the same venue. It was kind of interesting because the customers there, here's how we sell it. And, and then this is why we bought it. And the one lady answered the question on why she bought it. And she came out and she was sitting right in front of me. So after the conference, after the seminar, I asked her, what do you think about a salesperson that doesn't have an answer and needs to say, I need to go get my SE and do another appointment with you. How does that make you feel? And she's like, oh my gosh, it's wonderful because listen to this, I don't expect the salesperson to know everything. And when that salesperson presents themselves as being that way, I don't believe them. So there's a real valid point for a salesperson to get to a certain level with their customer and then say, okay, got it. I need to bring in an SE to explain this some more so we all understand exactly what you want to do. And then my favorite things are, let's do a calendar close. What are you doing Thursday at 2:00? How's it, and close for that date, get that date on there right away. I mean, don't say, well, we'll meet in a couple of weeks, get something definite, that's the sales process that I help with, for the salespeople to move that sale along.
And it's much easier right now because almost everything is through Zoom and everyone has their calendar in front of them.
Right.
There is no excuse
on one of their other screens,
There is no excuse that, sorry, I don't have my calendar in front of me. You'll have to reach out. Yeah. Like if they say that on Zoom, they're not interested in meeting with you and you can just call it a day.
Yeah. You're right. Absolutely right.
So Doc, Benny and I think we've written, 10 other questions. Unfortunately, we're running out of time.
Okay.
So we will have to jump into the not so fire round, but we might have to do it in fire round succession just to make sure we get it in a timely fashion.
Sure.
So Benny, do you want to lead us off?
So I guess just very simply, what do you love about solution selling?
I love talking to customers and finding out what the problem is. I mean, it's fun. It's really fun to be able to do that. And when the customer is just kind of hemming and hawing and you're able to bring that out and the salesperson says, I couldn't get that out of them. I don't know. I just get a big kick out of that. Here, I'll even tell you my favorite question to ask a customer. I ask this all the time. Question is, what else? So they're telling me stuff, I'm writing it down. As I said, there's that pregnant pause and I might just go, what else? And then they just keep going. And the salespeople, they're like, I don't know. I love doing that. I love pulling the information out.
That's an even better way than just staying silent to get more information. Just straight up asking what else. That's genius. I love that.
It's a great question.
Going back to that dead silence thing, if you're planning on doing, just a quick tip for the folks listening, if you're planning on doing this, let your salespeople know, because sometimes they're uncomfortable with that silence and they will fill in the void versus allowing the customer to actually answer.
Great point. They also don't like the word no. You know, when you say to it, no, we can't do that. They're like, oh my God, we can't do that. But it may not be important. They don't understand that.
Well, there's a gentleman by the name of Chris White. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's a trainer, and he talks about the qualified no, where they ask you a question, the answer is no, but you ask them a couple more questions to make sure that this is what they want, and and then you can say like no or yes, but we can do it in another. No, we can't do it this way, but we can do it that way, etc. Or is it important? Whatever. All right. I guess this not so fire round is going not so fire round. Right.
Sorry.
No, I'm the one doing most of the talking, which is strange. Question number 2. By the way, these are the same 4 questions we ask every guest.
Okay.
Almost every guest. So, what would you change about the role of sales engineering?
Oh, that is a very good question. What would I change? I guess from what I hear from some of the other folks who are pretty good, just the better techniques of asking questions. So many people, including SEs, are listening and wanting to reply right away without that dead air. So I would like to see just a better way of asking questions, and a better vetting out of the process from a lot.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation. All right, so you've obviously had a lot of great insights that you've shared throughout the show, and obviously are full of more as well. One could ask where they all came from, but maybe just to pay it forward, what would be some books, tools, or other resources you may recommend for others to either learn more about solutions engineering, solution selling, or printing? Heck, anything that you think would be interesting.
I listen to a lot of webinars. I listen to a lot of things like that. I don't have any specific books or anything that I can tell you that this one changed my life. A lot of what I do has just come from life experience. Again, my radio career, which was a long time ago, it just gives me the ability to speak and to be able to relate to people. And all of my stuff I've really pulled from life experience. So I don't have a really good answer for that one, other than just consume. I consume whatever I can, articles, webinars, as much information as I can. And we live in an information world, so you can get stuff from all over the place.
That's key. Yeah. I mean, there's no information, there's no experience like life experience. And I mean, and like you said too, like you're right, we do live in the information age. So
I earned these gray hairs here, so that's for sure.
This is what a future Benny will look like, you think?
He might.
Before and after?
I just trimmed mine down a little bit. I was close to there, but I'm looking for a job, so I trimmed mine back.
So if I understand you correctly, what you're saying, or let me know if this is right, don't limit yourself to one resource. Consume as much as you can without overloading your neurons.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Many people and diverse people as well. I mean, let's not overlook the women in our industry. They have a lot to say, and it's easy to do in a computer field. But I tell you what, I've worked with a lot of females that have really taught me a heck of a lot in this business. So don't, assume or stereotype or anything along that line. Get opinions from anyone, any culture, any, anything that can come into you can be a benefit, and realize that. And that's again the beauty of the information world that we live in. I love listening to. I have a huge following in England and in Australia, so I get a lot of stuff from not just North America, and actually in Canada too. I've worked with a ton of customers in Canada, so I get a lot of thoughts and things from all over the world, and consume them. That's the tip there.
Nice. It's good. All right. Last question of the not so fire round. In your mind, what separates the great SEs from the okay or not so good ones?
At the end of the day, it's going to be pretty much the close ratio that you have.
Okay.
So, if you're a good SE and you do everything the right way, the salesperson's next step should be, okay, when did you want this delivered? And sign that. And so many of the engagements that I get involved with, I don't have a percentage, but it's got to be well over 70%, probably closer to 80%. When I get involved, the salesperson just has to, I don't want to say take an order, but, get the process started. Okay, let's, what do we need to do to get going? And that's the sign of a good SE. And that's what separates a good SE from a not so good one.
Okay. All right. Last two questions of the day. If people want to reach out to you, where can they do that? And how can our community of sales engineers help you today?
Best place is LinkedIn. I actually don't have a Facebook account. I just don't have time for that. So I live on LinkedIn. Doc Ballje is my LinkedIn address. The last name is Ballje. So that's the best way to get me. My email is simply first initial last name @gmail.com. If you want to email, that's fine as well. How you can help is, again, this podcast will help a lot because you've given me a platform to speak about not only what I can do, but topics that are near and dear to my heart. So I'm just hoping we can spread that info. And personally, I'm hoping that somebody finds that what I say is interesting and they'll want to offer me a position with them as well, because I'm actively looking and can't wait to use my talents. The last talent that I really have that I'll bring up real quick that you can't teach is passion. And I have a ton of passion, and I want to bring that to the next company. So if you know a company that's looking for passion, send them my way.
Yeah, I couldn't tell. Thanks. Well, by the way, first initial of your nickname or your real name?
Well, Don and Doc both have a D. So it's DBALLJE at Gmail.
We will link your LinkedIn on the show notes. This is show 152. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Doc, for coming on, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ramsey. Thanks, Benny. Appreciate both of you guys.
All right. And this brings us to the end of the show with Doc. What do you think, Benny?
I think it's great. I mean, I think his ability to articulate his knowledge of his space is probably unmatched. I mean, he knows the space very well. Voice for radio, obviously. So very sounds really good, very easy to listen to. And the last thing he mentioned there, his passion, goodness gracious. I mean, I know you called it out as well, but goodness, does that guy not have a lot of passion? It's something else.
I never thought that talking about printers would be actually interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like people are always looking for the greater solution. Like, I want a better solution to sell. But printers are printers, right? Like, it's a commodity, and we talked about that. But the fact that he's so passionate about it, that's why he can actually change it, and he knows what problems it solves and change it into a solution. If he didn't have the passion, he probably wouldn't do the research to find out what problems it solves. So I think it all stems from passion, right? Passion leads to discovery, leads to learning. So whatever you're doing, I hope you're passionate about what it is that you do. Otherwise, it's going to be a long life. Because
if you're passionate about it, at least if you're genuine about it. So even if you don't feel a strong burning desire to sell things, find people, you make things, find a solution for people, if you at least have a genuine interest in doing that while you're doing it, while you're maybe finding your passion, so long as you're genuine about that, I think that
yeah. But here's what I'm thinking. You have to be genuine about solving people's problems, but you have to be passionate about the product. So you have the ability to learn more about it. If you hate what you're selling, if you're selling printers and you hate printers, or you're selling cars and you hate cars, you're never going to put in the effort to learn more about it. Okay. And you might want to move somewhere. I'm not saying it's wrong. You should love it. If you don't try to move somewhere that you'd actually enjoy the product you're selling, right? Or at least put in the effort. Maybe you'll end up. People tend to have passion about products that know they solve problems, right?
Right. Yeah, I guess
at least.
Okay, go ahead.
Right. So if you put in the effort to learn more about it, maybe you can then get passionate about it. Or if you're passionate about it, maybe you'll learn more about it. It's like the chicken and the egg, which comes first?
And maybe you don't have to necessarily be passionate about the product itself, but rather passionate about what the product serves as a vessel for, which is, as you said, solving problems. So if I'm passionate about solving problems, then I don't care what the product is, but if this is the thing that's going to solve your problem, then I'm passionate to do everything I can to, make me better at solving those problems, even if it is through the software that I don't care as much about it. But you're right. Ideally, you are passionate about it, and you do find something that you are actually passionate about.
Yeah, in an ideal world, it doesn't always work. It doesn't always happen, but if you're not passionate and try to put in the effort, maybe you become passionate, or maybe you learn and you hate it more and move on to the next gig. Something I want to bring up, and I quote, "If you solve the problem, the price is secondary." I've seen it so many times where salespeople get beat up on price, mainly because they're not seen as they're solving a problem, or they're not seen as solving a problem different than their competitors. They're just the same thing, like a Toyota or a Honda, right? You're going to negotiate based on price unless you love one over the other. So I love that quote, and I just wanted to highlight it for today.
What to highlight? I agree with that.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's not belabor the point. If you've been listening to the show and you haven't left a rating and review, I highly recommend you do that, not for your own benefits, but for mine. So people will know this is a good show. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like. Feed the algorithm, as they say, as other famous YouTubers say, I guess. And thank you guys for listening. So anything else you want to add, Benny?
Nope. Here we are in March. Happy 1 year anniversary of being locked down for most people listening. Better times are ahead.
Yep. All right. Well, with that good news, thanks for the reminder, Benny. This is Ramsey for Benny, and we're signing off.